Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 animated comic book film Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that this review will have spoilers. I will give you a heads up when I get around to talking about the script, because that's pretty much when I'm going to be going into major spoilers. So I just wanted to make that clear right off the bat here for those of you who haven't seen the film yet, because I don't necessarily want the film to be spoiled for you, because it just came out, and I know there's a lot of people who are really excited to see it. Now, for those of you who want my quick little condensed thoughts on it before I go more in depth, I liked it. I didn't love it as much as other people did. I know there are a lot of people who give it like 10 out of 10, 97% in Rotten Tomatoes, 5 stars, A plus. Um, I'm kind of in the minority here when it comes to liking but not loving the film, and really still being a bigger fan of the first movie. The first movie was something truly legitimately unique and one of a kind, came out of left field, and it had a simpler story and plot, but I felt it was more effective. Just because you have things more complex in nature when it comes to the story and the script, and you have multiple different arcs and so many more characters and cameos and callbacks and all of that, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's more effective. At least for me personally, when it comes to storytelling, or in particular a standalone film. And it's hard to really judge this as a standalone film because it's part one of a two-part epic, so to speak. So it's kind of only like half a story, and it doesn't really work that effectively as a standalone story. And a lot is riding on the third movie when it comes to making this work in the long run, and also just really tying everything together when it comes to the trilogy. But I like where it's going. And I did enjoy a fair amount of the fan service. The Spider Society scene was pretty epic, and it was really cool to see a lot of different Spider-Men and Spider People all in one place. The new Spider People that they showcase, like Spider Punk and the Indian Spider-Man and some of the other stuff, was fun. I wouldn't necessarily say either one was really on the same level as like Spider-Man Noir for me. It was great to see Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, in a larger capacity. That's honestly a big reason why I was curious about this film to begin with, even during the time when I hadn't actually seen the first film, because I'm a big fan of Spider-Man 2099, uh, and I've been wanting to see Spider-Man 2099 get more screen time. And he definitely does, but in a way that has me conflicted, and I will go into detail on that soon enough. When it comes to the animation, this film is just gorgeous. This film, at times, the animation can be a bit too jumpy or spotty, or hard to follow because of the style and the flashing edits and a lot of the other stuff, especially when it comes to some of the action sequences. But I didn't think it was too much, and I think it was an overload. What you do get, though, is animation that, in terms of the overall quality, even tops what was present in the last film, which is a huge feat because the last film revolutionized animation and animated films in 2018, because it just did something so fresh and innovative. And this film carries over that same style and vibe, but then just kicks it into overdrive. And there were certain ways that the character models move and the animation just flows or transitions from one style to the next that is absolutely jaw dropping. I will say one very consistent thing about this movie that is consistently great and top notch is the animation. So it's definitely a movie that is worth seeing just for the visual eye candy alone. I just feel the story wasn't as strong as it could be, and it affected the pacing. And there are certain elements that I'm not too big on that I think were poorly handled and poorly conceived. But overall, I had fun with it. I will admit that. I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. I definitely would like to watch it again when it comes out in 4K just to see some of the other cameos and stuff like that in a little bit more detail. Now I'm going to start talking about the various different aspects of the film a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to start with the direction like I normally do. So this is directed by three people yet again, but three completely different directors than the directors of the previous film, which I find interesting that none of the previous three directors were either approached or asked to come back. And I'm just spitballing there. I could be completely off base. They might have been asked, but they're busy doing something else. But it's just interesting that you have a sequel to a franchise and no one who worked on the previous film, other than one of the writers, is involved with it when it comes to the conceptual process. And I think the three directors here, Joaquim, Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, Justin K. Thompson, I think they collaborate with each other well. I think you have the same consistent connection when it comes to conceptualization and just visual flow and feel that was present in Into the Spider-Verse with those three directors. So you don't have a clash of different styles going on here. And I think this movie is definitely more ambitious when it comes to its action and when it comes to the larger set pieces and the spectacle of it. So I think all three of these directors are definitely up to the task of handling such a daunting and demanding uh, task to begin with when it comes to just tackling such a big film, because this has more Spider-Man in it than anything that has ever been released when it comes to a movie. Even No Way Home isn't even remotely close to having as much Spider-Man or Spider People as this film has in it. So this is quite a difficult film when it comes to just kind of pulling it all off. And I think all three of them did an admirable job for something that's just so difficult. Not only dealing with a antagonist and Spot that is very uh, hard to pull off animation wise because he's always in a different spot, no pun intended. It's a difficult thing to pull off with all the portals and all the other stuff and so on and so forth. And they did a great job with that character, as well as all of the other sequences that are just trying to really be eye candy. And I want to give the directors and pretty much the entire crew a lot of credit for just how amazing this film looks and how consistently amazing it looks when it comes to the animation. And on top of that, how they blended things together with different color schemes and how the colors actually matched the mood. It was a really awesome and fun thing to see when you would see the colors in the background or the colors in a scene actually match the mood of the sequence or of certain characters. This is very evident when it comes to the sequence involving Gwen and her father when they reconcile. The entire sequence has this like watercolor kind of look to it, and the colors start blending and just becoming brighter and more colorful when things start to mend together again when it comes to the relationship between Gwen and her father. And so there's a lot of moments like that in the film. Like right off the bat with the sequence where Gwen is drumming, you just see something that's just unlike anything you've ever seen before when it comes to a comic book animated film. And it's just really cool to see an animated movie with so much style and so much flair that is trying new things. I mean, Spider Punk, they spent like 3 years working on the animation of this character. And when you see it, it's really a sight to behold because the character is a walking punk collage. That's really what he is. He's a walking Sex Pistols album. And it's got that whole punk aesthetic just throughout the character, and it's really cool to see this character move around and interact in the environment. And there's just a lot to like about the film when it comes to the direction and the animation. The action sequences at times can be a little choppy, a little kind of hard to follow, but I think that's honestly because of just the chosen style of animation, and just because of like just how many colors that are on the screen, and just how many characters are on the screen in some of these action scenes. So I think that's why some of the action sequences at times can be a little bit too frenetic, and I think maybe if they kind of just scale things back a little bit in this third film, then I think you can have a nice blend of styles and flair that would be a less would be less hard on the eyes, and easier to follow. But that's really the only criticism I have for the direction, is really for those moments, because the slower moments, the moments where you just have characters interacting with one another, like the scenes between Gwen and Miles, they're very impressive in terms of how they still have a really striking visual style to them, but it's not like all over the place. It's not like the camera isn't like flipping 360 degrees and doing pans and zooms and angles at every turn and in every scene. There's a nice mix of style and flair even in those sequences. In particular, the shots of Gwen and Miles when they're hanging out on that building, and there's that shot where she and Miles are upside down, and they're having that moment with one another, and you see the skyline below them. So there's a lot of really nice looking shots and some great framing in this film. And I know there's a lot of people who say things like, "Well, this movie's a work of art," and it really is. I mean, there's a lot of sequences in this. Honestly, probably the entire movie. You could just take a screenshot and you could put it in an art gallery, and it would be right at home. So yeah, the direction is definitely a consistently solid aspect of the movie, as well as the visuals. The screenplay, on the other hand, not necessarily on the same level of consistency, at least for me personally. And this is where I'm going to be going into major spoilers, because I can't really talk about why I am not as blown away and just mesmerized and astonished by the quality of the writing and the script as other critics are or other people are without going into spoilers. So, you've been warned, and I'm gonna start breaking things down here. So the script is written by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, as well as David Callahan. And other than Phil Lord, because I think he was involved with writing Into the Spider-Verse, no other writers from that film are involved here. And you can kind of tell. It seems like there's a different approach here when it comes to the structure of the writing and with how certain characters are handled. And I get it. I understand. Different perspectives can sometimes lead to some really great results. But I would have liked to have had a consistent thread, maybe a little bit more of that. Because Phil Lord, he's one of them, but it would have been nice to maybe have had another writer who worked on Into the Spider-Verse also working on this instead of him bringing in his buddy and collaborator, frequent collaborator, and Christopher Miller and David Callahan. David Callahan in particular, because I think David Callahan is not a good writer. I mean, this is the guy who wrote Wonder Woman. He co-wrote Wonder Woman 1984, folks. He's the same guy who did that. He wrote the Mortal Kombat reboot from 2020. He wrote Zombieland Double Tap. He wrote the Doom. He co-wrote the Doom movie. So yeah, this is not really that great of a writer. He also wrote Shang-Chi. So yeah, like I would have liked to have had a writer who worked on Into the Spider-Verse brought back instead of having David Callahan involved. I mean, I swear to God, the Spider-Ham would probably be a better writer than this guy. But here's my problem with the script. The script is not necessarily problematic because of the fact that it's part one of a two-part epic. Although I feel that if they just trim certain things down, then you could just make everything that you were going to do in the third movie present in this screenplay, and you just have one great film instead of two movies that could easily be of differing quality. But, you know, that would mean less money and less revenue for the studio, so I understand the thought process there. And also, maybe there is more to the third film. Maybe there is more to Beyond the Spider-Verse that is just so extensive that they need that extra film to really cram everything in and just pack in all the storytelling and all the visuals and everything. And if that's the case, I think that's definitely the right decision, but that's something that only time will tell. But that's not really my main issue with it. It's just the fact that this script is kind of too lazy at times, especially when it comes to rehashing certain dramatic elements. The whole stuff with Miles and his parents and how they want him to do better and they want him to take things more seriously, and he's having a falling out between him and his parents. That already was dealt with and handled in the last film. There was no need to rehash this to the point of just nauseum. Like, it really felt very tedious to me because there were just a lot of scenes where dialogue was just stretched out to just extreme lengths, discussing the same sort of drama and the same topics that we already dealt with in the previous film with Miles and his father. So I don't really feel that was really necessary to go through all of that again, especially at such extreme length. And it made the stuff with Gwen and her father also feel repetitive because it's kind of the same thing. It's the same sort of dynamic where a superhero is dealing with a conflict with their parents and they don't want to reveal their secret identity because they don't know what their parents are going to do, and so on and so forth. There are some differences, I guess, when it comes to the dynamic between uh, father and their kid, but the differences aren't so immense that it feels like the stuff with Gwen and her father is so unique compared to the stuff with Miles and his father or Miles's mother. So I don't really feel it was necessary to just stretch things out that much, especially with Miles. Like just have the stuff with him and his mom, because that would maybe switch things up a little bit more, because and I think that's what they were trying to do, but it still felt like they were putting a focus on him and his father again and the whole falling out between those two. So I really feel that just shift the focus even more to Miles and his mom and their contentious relationship. And then when it comes to father and child dynamic, shift the majority of the focus when it comes to that to Gwen and her father. And that's because I like those scenes better than any of the stuff with Miles and his parents. So I honestly would have liked to have seen more of that, because it almost felt like there wasn't enough for the scenes to really resonate on an even deeper level, because you have the opening sequence with Gwen and the vulture from the Renaissance dimension and the other members of the Spider Society getting involved in the battle, and the whole conflict between Gwen and her father. And that's why Gwen winds up going to the Spider Society, because her father's going to arrest her, even though she reveals herself to be Spider Woman. And after that, Captain Stacy is pretty much out of the movie for a good chunk of the running time, because then it shifts its focus more to Miles and his parents again. And I don't really think that was needed. I think another way to break up the monotony of the family drama in the script is to have Miles being Spider-Man more in Brooklyn, not just have scenes of him fighting these villains that are essentially montages. Like, actually have a whole sequence of him fighting a bad guy, because you didn't really see a lot of that. He fought the armadillo like super quickly in a admittedly pretty funny scene, but other than that, like, what is he fighting? He's fighting Spot, and I get it. You want to have Spot, but have another sequence where he's fighting someone else, or have a scene where the montages are extended more, and it's not just quick flashes of him punching somebody. Like, just a little bit more of that instead of just the typical standard family drama definitely would have helped things. That's just me personally. And speaking of that opening sequence, I think that was kind of off. Not the whole stuff with the drumming and all of that. The action sequence when Gwen is in the museum and she's fighting the vulture. I didn't really feel the writing when it comes to the comedy in particular was very sharp. I thought a lot of the jokes felt kind of forced from her, and they didn't really land. But that's just me personally. It just felt like the one-liners and everything. She was riffing and she was doing all this, but she wasn't really saying anything that was that funny. So it just felt like the writing was just having her riff for riff's sake. And I don't really care for that. If you're gonna have a character riff and make fun and have one-liners, like, don't just do one-liners for one-liners' sake. Like, some of them really didn't work for me, like the whole Dark Garfield thing. Uh I don't know why that why what? I guess because I think it's like an Andrew Garfield reference or something or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm just out of the loop on it, but they kept repeating that one, and it did nothing for me. And that's kind of how it was for a lot of the jokes in this. Like, I got bigger laughs, in all honesty, in the first movie than here. Like, there's a few moments that definitely did make me chuckle, like some of the references to different spider people or spider creatures, like the T-Rex Spider-Man in the Spider Society scene, or a couple other sequences. But There was stuff that just felt too forced, like the stuff with Peter B. Parker and his cute little baby daughter. That looked like something straight out of a Pixar movie or a Illumination film. Not for me. I felt that was just incredibly forced, and like, oh my god, it's cute, and I'm like, aren't you gonna love the cute little spider baby? I'm like, no, I find that character annoying and cloying, and it doesn't really fit the tone of the movie, especially when they're trying to be darker with Miguel and his character. And that leads me to what is arguably my biggest problem with this script: the handling of Miguel O'Hara, Spider Man 2099. I am definitely in the minority here. I know that. But I got to be honest. I don't like this take on this character. I don't like turning him into a fractured hero and making him essentially another antagonist. I had a feeling they were going to do that in the trailer, and that's exactly what they do here. It's one of those things where he's a hero who's burdened and he feels like he has to maintain the status quo at all costs. So if that means that Miles's father is going to die in order for the Spider-Verse to remain intact, or for there to be less risk of the Spider-Verse falling apart, he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that that event occurs. And of course, there's pushback from Miles because it's his father, and it leads to a conflict between the two. And there is some good with that, with the whole sequence at Spider Society when all the different spider people are chasing after Miles. That's a crazy ass scene, and I don't think you would really necessarily have a reason to have it unless there is some sort of conflict that leads to Miles having to be chased by so many spider people. I get it. I understand that. That's fine. But I just felt like the character, it just was one of those things where they changed him too much. They made him just a typical, just boring, sympathetic, cliched antagonist, with the only difference being that he's a hero, but with the same sort of tropes. And what I really don't like is that the writers turned Miguel into a they turned him into a soundboard and a mouthpiece for their problems with fans of Spider-Man, especially Peter Parker, not being as open to or not being as big of fans of Miles. And so what they did is they turned Miguel into this representation of fan angst. And that is what in particular really rubs me the wrong way. You're taking a character that I and a lot of other Spider-Man fans legitimately love, and you're twisting that character to essentially dunk on fans who don't like Miles Morales as much as Peter Parker. And I get it. I understand. There are some people who don't like Miles for reasons that are kind of absurd. But that doesn't mean you have to turn Miguel into a representation of those fans. And I'm not making this up. There's an interview with the writers that explain that fairly clearly. And I don't like that. I don't like turning Miguel into fan angst against Miles. That's not cool to me. And it's crazy when you watch the post-credit scene in Into the Spider-Verse and then see how Miles I mean not Miles. Miles is the same, but see how Miguel is in Across the Spider-Verse. They're two completely different portrayals and characters. And I know people say, well, that's because that was him prior to the whole thing where he went to the universe where his family was alive and then he watched it disintegrate before his very eyes. And I'm like, okay, I understand that, but it's still one of those things where it is quite a dramatic shift. And also, when it comes to Miguel, it really does depend on how the third film really resolves a lot of this. If they do a typical sort of thing where he realizes the error of his ways and then makes a heroic sacrifice and stops Spot, or does one of the main things to stop Spot in the third movie, I know a lot of people are going to be okay with that. I won't be, because that's predictable, and I think that's kind of bullshit. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that concept if they go that route in the third film. But if they go this route where he comes to the realization that he had a very flawed way of going about things, and he then turns a new leaf, so to speak, and he becomes an integral part of the film's climax. And there's a lot of things for him to do, and he's kind of up front and center, or at least alongside Miles, or on the same level as Miles or Gwen. And he gets a lot of shots in and does a lot of cool stuff, and is a big reason why they defeat Spot. And he lives, and he forms a new bond with Miles, and he welcomes Miles into the Spider Society by the end of the movie, then I'm going to be on board with that. Honestly. Like, it's an interesting thing to do in terms of shifting around and changing Miguel and making him a fractured hero, but only if you handle it properly. If they just do a 180 last minute and then he dies, that's lame. But if they do something where he has a legitimate redemption arc and it's substantial enough, then I'm fine with that. So really, with Miguel, I'm not okay with making him a fractured hero and a representation of fan angst on a certain level. It's like one of those things where I'm not a super big fan of it, but I can deal with it if the execution is good. And right now, I don't really see the final result. So I'm only getting like half of what maybe they're thinking about doing. And what I'm getting is not something that I'm really big on, but it just depends on how they execute it. Like what happens in Beyond the Spider-Verse when it comes to Miguel's character. And there were a lot of stuff though in the script which really surprised me, and I really liked the twist at the end where Miles is on the he got transported to the different universe where there is no Spider-Man, and he is the Prowler in that future. That's cool. That's some unique, interesting stuff. The whole setup where Gwen created her own team of Spider People to go up against Miguel's team in order to save Miles. It's a great setup for the third movie. I'm excited and I'm looking forward to seeing the third movie for that reason alone. And I do think there are some really nice, sweet, and charming moments between Gwen and Miles that are really nice and really do resonate pretty strongly. And there's some other moments of drama that are okay, but a lot of the dramatic elements, other than the stuff with Miles and Gwen and their budding and growing relationship between one another, and Gwen's reluctance because in every universe Gwen falls for Spider-Man and it doesn't end well, which I thought that was a nice point to make. The drama, it doesn't, it just feels rehashed from the first movie. But when it comes to a lot of the references and a lot of the other stuff, like if you're a diehard Spider-Man fan, like you're going to be in heaven because there's just so many different cameos and different versions of the character from different universes that make appearances in this film, that it's going to be hard. It might even be hard for you to catch all of them in just the first viewing. Like there's honestly that many. There's one in particular that I'm kind of surprised though was not featured more prominently, and maybe they're gonna do it more in the third movie or something. Maybe they're saving it for that. Spider-Man 1994 from the animated series. They had Spider-Man Unlimited, and they had the Scarlet Spider, which honestly his scenes were, I would say, out of all of the new Spider-Men or Spider People, he was kind of the standout for me because he definitely got the biggest laughs from me. But where's Spider-Man 1994? You had the Spectacular Spider-Man, and you had all these other references to even live-action Spider-Man movies. But where was Spider-Man 1994? Maybe it was like a blink and you miss it kind of thing, or maybe he was there in the background somewhere and I didn't catch it. Uh, Feel free to sound off in the comments down below and let me know if you saw him. But I'm like, where is that Spider-Man? Like, why wasn't that Spider-Man featured more in the whole scene where the Spider people, the Spider-Men, are trying to tell Miles to just go with the status quo for the good of the Spider-Verse? Um, but yeah, I mean, still a lot of fun stuff. Still a lot of fun references. This and just craziness. There's just a lot of really crazy, unique looking Spider people, and I'm a fan of Spider-Man, but I kind of fell out of reading the comics for quite a long time now. So a lot of these new versions I did not know anything about. So it was cool to see them. It was cool to see the variations and the different variants of Spider People. And I definitely feel the film really does pick up when you get to the Spider Society. When Gwen uses her watch and gets back into Miles's universe and they reunite, that's when the film picks up. Because when it comes to the script and the story, like even the opening sequence with Vulture was just kind of there for me. And there was some fun stuff like the Lego Spider-Man sequence, but there was just a lot of stuff in like the first half that just was really not as interesting or as entertaining to me as the second half of the movie. But that's just me personally. But yeah, good script. Definitely has the potential to be great with the added knowledge of what they're going to do with the third movie. And one more thing I want to mention about the script is definitely Spot. I think it was really cool to see Spot used in this way, because Spot has always been considered a second-rate, low-rent Spider-Man villain, and the fact that they turned that villain and turned him into something intimidating and genuinely compelling in his own way, with the whole origin of him being the guy that Miles threw a bagel at in the last movie, that was really a nice touch. I thought that was a clever concept, and I think they utilized it pretty well. Although I will say that they kind of made the Spot's personality way too much like Wade Wilson for my tastes, but they're doing that a lot, I've noticed, where you just have these characters who are just trying to be Deadpool or Ryan Reynolds. And I'm like, there's only one Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool. Just get your own style, get your own shtick. But yeah. And it was nice to see Peter B. Parker again, although I don't think they used him as much as they could have. Definitely when he's just spending too much time dealing with the spider baby. Um, but yeah, overall, still a good script. The voiceover work, I mean, I don't really have any problems with it. Other than maybe Jason Schwartzman's take on the Spot, because it's just too similar to Ryan Reynolds for me. Like he's just doing a Ryan Reynolds impression for the entirety of the running time. But other than that, like I think it's a great cast. Once again, Shameik Moore is really spectacular, really stellar as Miles. Didn't miss a beat after all of these years. Same goes for Hailee Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy. I actually think her work here, especially when it comes to the more somber moments and the more serious moments, is even a step up from her voiceover work in the last movie. When it comes to the quips and the jokes and the riffing in the first part of the film when she's in the art gallery. Not so much, but I don't really feel that's Hailee's fault. It's more of the lines that she's saying, that she's given to work with. Brian Tyree Henry once again is definitely a good presence here as Jefferson Morales, Miles's father. Lauren Vélez gets more to work with, more screen time as Rio, and I honestly would have liked to have seen even more from her because I thought she really did such a wonderful job bringing that character to the screen for the second time, and especially when it comes to the tender moments between her and Miles. Jake Johnson once again is really good as Peter B. Parker, but he's not in it that much, and he just deals with Mayday for most of the running time. Issa Rae is Jessica Drew, which is fine. I was more into Karan Soni as Spider-Man India. I really enjoyed his personality and his charisma. It was a lot of fun. Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie. That's another one that I liked more than Issa Rae. I would say out of the new ones, like Spider-Man India, I would definitely say Hobart. Hobie was the one that probably stood out the most to me, other than Ben Riley and his scene stealing sequences. Oscar Isaac as Miguel O'Hara. I mean, for what they were asking him to do, which is essentially be another antagonist next to Spot, a fractured hero, he nails that. He's downright intimidating at times. He definitely portrays the unhinged aspects of the character well. But that's not how I like my Miguel O'Hara. That's not how I like that character. So it's something I'm conflicted on. It's good. It's good voiceover work. But I don't like that Miguel. And I think that's the point. He's supposed to be kind of like a heel. And I think he'll probably turn face at some point. It just depends on how they handle it. Shea Wigham, I also want to mention as George Stacy. Really liked his take on George, especially the scenes between him and Gwen. He gave me Mickey Rourke vibes. Like I almost thought that Mickey Rourke voiced the character, but that definitely wasn't the case. Um, you have Greta Lee as the Spider Society AI. It's kind of there. It was nice to see Mahershala Ali back as Aaron Davis, but as the Earth 42 version. In the sequence near the end, Andy Samberg, he was Ben Riley. He was Scarlet Spider. He was good enough that I'm looking forward to seeing more of Andy Samberg's Ben Riley in the third movie because he's a member of Miguel's team, so he's definitely going to be in it more. I guess Jarrell Jerome voices Miles, the Earth 42 Miles. So it's a different voice actor. I like that. I like that it's not the same voice actor who voices Miles G. Morales. Okay, cool. Jack Quaid, he was in it for a little bit as Peter Parker, Gwen's universe. That was another dramatic element I think did work in the script that I forgot to mention, but I'll mention it here, where they give you more of a glimpse into. They don't really give you a glimpse. They show you Peter's death in Gwen's universe, and I thought it was a nice twist on things. They made him the Lizard, and he took a serum and turned into a lizard because he wanted to be more like Gwen. And then during a battle and at like the prom or something, a piece of metal falls and kills Peter. And that's why Gwen's dad is so angry and so adamant about catching Spider-Woman because he sees Spider-Woman with Peter and Peter's dead. And so he puts two and two together and he thinks that Spider-Woman killed Peter. I like that. I think that had a nice dynamic and a nice bit of extra drama, and it really makes you understand why Gwen doesn't want to get close to anybody. She doesn't want to have friends. That's why it took her so long to warm up to Miles. Rachel Dratch, she essentially played her Debbie Downer character from SNL as Miss Weber, the counselor. But it was fun to hear Rachel Dratch again. Um, then you got like Ziggy Marley, who voices a Jamaican shop owner during the scene where Spot's trying to rob the store. Um, and that's really about it. Like there are other voiceover actors and actresses, but to be honest, that's the main cast. And the film has some good technical elements. I mean, it once again features some excellent and just really good editing by Mike Andrews. The editing in this is even more impressive in some aspects than the editing in the last film because of the fact that there's just so much more going on. The music by Daniel Pemberton. I don't think it's as good of a score as the last film because it doesn't really seem as prominent or as prevalent. But the bits that you do hear that are essentially reused cues from the last movie are still effective. But the new stuff just kind of just for me. Uh, and the new music, the new songs in particular, did not really stand out as much uh, for me as the songs on the soundtrack for Into the Spider-Verse. And it does have a longer running time, and honestly, it drags more. I really do feel it drags more than the last film did. The last film, even though it was almost 2 hours, I think it went by at a pretty brisk pace. This at times it's a little too lackadaisical. It's a little too meandering and just kind of just not necessarily weaving through scenes in a rapid succession, or at least in a quick enough pace. And rapid, it doesn't necessarily need to be rapid because that means it's too fast. And but there's just some moments where things are too fast and too kind of hard to follow and just kind of fast forward through things. And then there's other moments where it just feels like it's going on forever. And I think that definitely does affect the film's pacing. It is one of those things where like one half of the film is drastically different than the other when it comes to the pacing. And I just feel the first half needed to be tuned up a little bit more. And then I feel that it would have been a better paced movie, and I think it honestly would have been a better film. Period. Just trim down the stuff with Miles and his parents and the whole drama, the whole teen drama stuff. Trim it down. Trim down some of the dialogue, at least, and then I think you're in a good spot. But yeah, as it is, it's enjoyable enough. It's definitely got some grand, just spectacular moments of spectacle. It's worth seeing just for the visuals. And if you're a fan of the last one, I definitely would recommend it. I'm definitely on board for Beyond the Spider-Verse just to see what kind of new universes and what kind of different spider people, what kind of new unique style of animation that they're going to throw at the screen, and to see how they're going to handle Miguel and what they're going to do with his hopeful redemption arc, and how they're going to stop Spot, and what's going to happen with Earth 42 and Miles and alternate Miles as the Prowler, and what's going to happen with Gwen and her team in terms of how they're involved with everything, and what's going to happen when they clash with Miguel's squad. Really looking forward to it. But yeah, that's my long, in depth review of Spider Man Across the Spider Verse. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.